Hello, beautiful community. Just a very quick analytical video. There is a report in the FT that Trump wants a 5% NATO defense spending target and will continue to militarily support Ukraine. So let's read it and do an infinitesimal analytical response. Trump's team has told European officials that the incoming president will demand NATO members increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP. The president-elect's closest foreign policy aides shared his intentions in discussions with senior European officials this month. In a boost for allies concerned about their ability to protect Ukraine without Washington's backing, Trump now intends to maintain US military supplies to Ukraine after inauguration, according to 3 other people briefed on the discussions with Western officials. At the same time, Trump's to demand NATO more than double its 2% spending target, which only 23 of the 32 members currently meet, to 5%. 2 people briefed on the conversation said. One person said they understood that Trump would settle for 3.5% and that he planned to explicitly link higher spending on defense with favorable trade deals with the US. Key European NATO allies met NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Zelensky in Brussels on Wednesday night to discuss how the continent would adapt defense policies in response to Trump's return. And I must say they didn't say anything strategically coherent to Zelensky. While Trump still believes Ukraine should never be given NATO membership but wants an immediate end to the conflict, he thinks that giving Ukraine more weapons will ensure peace through strength. After 24 hours of meetings with NATO and EU leaders in Brussels this week, Zelensky said on Thursday that European pledges to defend Ukraine would not be sufficient without US involvement. Well, let's do a little bit of analysis. First, something cultural and historical. It is a reasonable liberal and liberal left position 25 years ago to say, look, the problem is interventionism, the problem is regime change, warring around the world, the problem is the military-industrial complex, and so we've got to take seriously, right, the West complying with the norms it claims to subscribe to on the international scene and not giving us all of this ghastly and hypocritical foreign engagement. Well, the problem is that there are a lot of people saying the very same thing today, but the world has changed. These are not the problems we have. Our problems are isolationism, a collapse of the global order, polarization and democratic decline at home that make Western states unable to coherently act as a collective unit on the international scene. It's a different world. You can have the same political values, but you can't have the same political concerns, even if you are wherever you were 25 years ago on the ideological spectrum, because the world's changed. And that's why a lot of people, including people on this platform, who were saying this and were right, 15 years ago, are now saying the same thing and are no longer right because the world's changed. So that's the first cultural historical remark. And then on Trump pushing Europe into more defense spending and on Trump wanting to bring the war to a close. Putin will not like Trump pushing Europe into greater defense spending because Putin thinks that Europe is useless, that it isn't really an entity with great agency on the international scene. It's the US that matters. So that's not good news for Putin, that Trump is not just advocating for that, but is threatening Europe, that it must spend more and less. But what Putin will like is that Europe needs to be threatened. That Europe is not just still, to a good degree, free riding on US security guarantees. I mean, I'm sitting here in London. I'm free riding on US security guarantees for years. But Europe is not just free riding on US security guarantees. Europe still is not able to act effectively as a coherent force that projects power on the international scene without the United States. And so that Putin will like. Putin will like the fact that when Zelensky is meeting Western leaders, they do not have a strategy. And I don't just mean for the war. They do not have a strategy for what Trump might do a few weeks from now. Now, this is being thought about in European corridors of power, but there's very little cohering between European powers. So what could happen, especially if Trump tries to push Ukraine into an unfavorable deal that leaves it unprotected, is that European powers will be caught out because they just don't have an approach. And they will start reacting ad hoc a few weeks from now, having not worked out what their approach is. So it's a spectacular case, again, of strategic floating in the micro, right, within a form of strategic floating in the macro. So macro not having a general approach to this conflict in Eastern Europe, and the micro is not having a strategic approach to what could happen a few weeks from now. Lots of love.